holy names, and to maintain material attachments in understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these offenses in order to quickly achieve desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer most humble obeisances on all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just as I trees who can fulfill to everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Shri Chaitanya Shastakam ki jai. Cheto Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam Shriya Kairava Chantrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purunarmita Sadhanam Sarvatmasnapanam Paramvijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakali Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smarani Nakalaha Etadeshri Tavakripa Bhagavam Mamapi Durudevami Desham Yaha Janina Nurakaha Trinatapi Suni Jena Tarorapi Seshnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sada Harihi Na Dhanam Na Janam Na Sundarim Kavitam Vajagadisha Kamaye Mama Jammani Jammanishvare Bhavata Bhaktir Haituki Tvai Ayinanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sthita Duri Satesham Vichintaya Nayanam Garadashrudaraya Vatanam Gadgada Rudaya Gira Pulakai Nichitam Vapurkata Tava Nama Grahane Bhavishati Yuga itam nimishena chakshusha pravisha itam shunya itam jagat sarvam govinda virahena me ashrisha va padaratam pinnastumam adarsanam marmhatam karotu va yatha tatha va vitathatu lampato mat prananathastu sa eva na paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shastakam ki jai. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes fire of conditional life, a repeated birth and death. This Sankirtana movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads a reason and benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases ocean transcendental bliss, and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone granted all benediction to human beings. Thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have rested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out kindness enable to easily approach you by holy name. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more taller than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor to desire peace for women, nor do I want any number followers, only want your cause of devotional service, birth after birth. O Sahamarjananda, I'm your eternal servitor, yet somehow I fall in the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death, and please may I want to add them to lotus feet. O my Lord, while my eyes bedeck your tears of love flowing constant when I chant holy name. While my voice choke up, on hair my body stand and recitation of your name. O Govinda, feeling on separation, I'm considered the moment to be like great millennium. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and shall remain so he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken heart by not being present before me.
He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Shastakam ki jai. Shri Guru Purnama prayers Kijay.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshum Litam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Shakham Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachadadesha Tarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Daitaya Kripaptaye Krishna Sampanna Vijnana Daine Prabhavin Namaha Madhuryo Jala Premadya Shrupa Nuka Bhaktita Shri Gaura Karana Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dina Tarini Rupanuga Viruddha Pasiddhanta Dvanta Harini Namo Gaura Kishoraya Saksha Vairagya Murtaye Vipalambara Sambodhe Padam Pujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachidananda Namini Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Virayate Gaura Virbhava Pumetwan Yadishta Chajana Priya Vaishnava Sava Bhauma Shri Jaganathaya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpa Durupishta Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaurateshe Namaha Panchatattvaatmakam Krishna Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakham Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karna Sindho Dinapanto Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Sratho Pango Mamamanda Materkati Masarva Swapadam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Dvindaranya Kaupadimadaha Shimadranakara Singhasanasto Shrimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prishtaibi Sevimano Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsivata Tatastita Karsham Venu Snergo Pir Gopinatha Shri Yektunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Datara Shivasade Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Shri Guru Pranama prayers Kijay. Shri Brahma Samhita Kijay.
Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarvadkarna Karanam Chintamani Parakarasat Masuka Praviksha Lakshariteshu Surabhi Ravipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasrashata Sampramasevimanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Venu Kavanantam Aravinda Dalayataksam Parharvatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Gantarpakoti Gamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Anga Rachandakala Savanamare Vamshi Ranang Gadam Panayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tripanga Lalitam Yata Prakasham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Anganyasya Sakalendriya Vittimanti Pasyanti Panti Karayanti Chilam Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Satujala Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Advaitam Achotam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedeshu Durlapam Adurlapam Atma Bhakta Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Panchastakoti Shatavatsara Sampragamyo Vayurathapi Manaso Muni Pangavanam Sopyasya Yapapada Simya Vichinta Tatve Govindamadi Purusham tamaham pachami. Ekopya sora chaitum jagatanta kotim ya chakti rasti jagatanta chayaya dantaha antantarastha paramanu chayantarastham govindamadi purusham tamaham pachami. Yad bhava pavithatiyo manuchastateva samprapya rupa mahima sanayana pusha suktaryam eva nikama patitai stuvanti govindamadi purusham tamaham pachami. Ananta chimmaya rasa patibhavitapi stapi evindya rupadaya kalapi goloka eva nivasati kalatma buddho govindamadi purusham tamaham pachami. Premanjana churtha bhakti vilochanena santa sadeva hidayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundam achintya guna sarupam govindamadi purusham tamaham pachami. Ramati murtishu kalanyamena tishtan nanavataram akaro bhuvaneshu kintu Krishna swayam samabhava parama pumamyo govindamadi purusham tamaham pachami.
Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shyamasundara is eternally manifest.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, he is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years.
He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore.
I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suttas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm Goloka, with Radha resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities in the company of her confidant Sakhis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shyamasundara, Krishna himself, with inconceivable and innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrisimha, Vamana, etc. as his subjective portion.
Glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janmatisya yato vihati taratasya so vigyaswarat. Tene Brahma Hidaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya. Tejo Varimudam Yata Vinimayo Yachati Sagomisha. Damnas Rena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Paramti Mahi. O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality, Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. First and part of the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him did the material universe is temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of material nature appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2. Dharma Pujita Kaitra Vujra Paramo Nirmotsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastava Matra Vastu Shivadam Tapo Trayon Mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamani Krite Kimva Purir Ishwaraha Sadyo Hridya Murukate Chapati Bihi Sususubhistakshana. Go ahead.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled with the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.3. Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam sukamukad amrita dravya samitam pibata Bhagavatam rasambhamayam ahur ahur raska vibhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the dietary of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Gaura Premanandi, Haribo, Haribo. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, verses 17, 18, 19, 20, I guess 21. Shinvata Swakapa Shinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantaksto Bhadrani Vidunati Srihit Satam Nastapraye Subhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utam Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Tadarajastamo Bhavo Kamalo Bhayaschaye Chete Tarunavidam Sitvam Sattve Prasidati Evam Prasana Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana Mukta Sanghasya Jayate Vidyate Hridaya Grantis Chinyante Sarva Samsaya Shiyante Shikarmani Drishta Evat Manishware. Okay, go ahead.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lusts and avarice are diminished.
When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga serves the hard knot of material affection,
Severs.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of asamsayam samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Good Premanandi people. So, we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 14, text number, well, we'll do 33 again, and then go on to the rest. Vitistu vidita tena karma vadyena bharata upasangamya viprar risim adho mukyabhya vasata Diti. Diti, the wife of Kashyapa. 2. But. Ridita, ashamed. Tena, by that. Karma, act. Avadyena, faulty. Bharata, O son of the Bharata family. Upasangamya, going nearer to. Viprarisim, the Brahmana sage. Adha Mukhi, with her face lowered. Abhya Vasata, politely said. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. When one is ashamed of an abominable action, one naturally becomes down-faced. Diti came to her senses after the abominable sexual intercourse with her husband. Such sexual intercourse is condemned as prostitution. In other words, sex life with one's wife is equal to prostitution if the regulations are not properly followed. So one time in a GBC meeting, this discussion came up about what are the limits of sex life and married life. So different people chimed in on it and gave their opinions. One person was very adamant and said, well, marriage is a opportunity for people, for men to control themselves and not be interested in other women. So they satisfy themselves with their wife. So then the discussion came up, well, wait a minute. Are you saying that you can have, sense gratification with your wife as much as you want? And he said, well, this is what I understand. by reading Prabhupada's books. So there was a long discussion when it took place. It finally became very clear that this one person's adamant, let's say, adamant discussion that Prabhupada or the Shastras give permission for unlimited sense gratification for the husband, so that there's no, so the men don't go around trying to have sense gratification with other women. So finally, that was rejected in a very adamant way by the GBC members. And eventually that person who maintained that point of view, he didn't fall down. He was actually a very smart devotee. But he was defeated and he was rejected. And here we say that such sexual intercourse is condemned as prostitution. In other words, sex life with one's wife is equal to prostitution if, that's a big word, if the regulations are not properly followed. Okay, so here also it's just confirming the same thing. Text 34. Are there any questions? Text 34. Ditir uvacha name garbam imam brahmam bhutanam rishabho vadit rudra patir hi bhutanam yasya karavam amhasam. Diti uvacha. The beautiful Diti said. Na, not, may, my, garbam, pregnancy, himam, this, Brahman, O Brahmana, Bhutanam, of all living entities, Rishabha, the noblest of all living entities, Avadit, let him kill. Rudra, Lord Shiva, Pati, Master, he, certainly, Bhutanam, of all living entities, Yasya, whose, Akaravam, I have done, Amhasam, offense. Translation. The beautiful Diti said, my dear Brahmana, kindly see that my embryo is not killed by Lord Shiva, the Lord of all living entities, because of the great offense I have committed against him. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Diti was conscious of her offense and was anxious to be excused by Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva has two popular names, Rudra and Asutosha. He is very prone to anger as well as quickly pacified. Diti knew that because of his being quickly angered, he might spoil the pregnancy she had so unlawfully achieved. But because he was also Ashutosa, she implored, it means she begged, her Brahmana husband to help her in pacifying Lord Shiva, for her husband was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. In other words, Lord Shiva might have been angry with Diti because she obliged her husband to transgress the law, but he would also refuse her husband's prayer. But he would not refuse her husband's prayer. Therefore, the application for excuse was submitted through her husband, she prayed to Lord Shiva as follows. Now this is all very clever. We can see how people can twist things, and try and turn things around, make what is bad seem good, make what's good seem bad. It's all a question of, there's a saying in my language, the tongue does not have a bone. Therefore, you can turn it any way you want. See? So, here we see how clever Diti is. Obviously, she comes from a very high family. But she has committed a very grave offense. And as we said yesterday, misery likes company. She's convincing her husband to help her make what is completely abominable seem okay. So, by getting him to plead to Lord Shiva that please excuse this. Sometimes people say, well, we didn't really mean to break the rules. It just happened like that. You know, so somehow or other make it seem as if it's not as bad as it actually is. So she says, it says here, she implored, that means she really begged with a lot of, let's say, vigor. She implored her Brahmana husband to help her in pacifying Lord Shiva, for her husband was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. In other words, Lord Shiva might have been angry with Diti because she obliged her husband to transgress the law, but he would not refuse her husband's prayer. Therefore, the application for excuse was submitted through her husband. She prayed to Lord Shiva as follows. Okay, any questions? And we'll go to the next verse. You can just read the English, anybody.
Translation. Let me offer my obeisances unto the angry Lord Shiva, who is simultaneously the very ferocious great demigod and the fulfiller of all material desires. He is all auspicious and forgiving, but his anger can immediately move him to chastise. Purport. Diti prayed for the mercy of Lord Shiva very cleverly.
Whoa, very cleverly. So, go ahead.
She prayed, the Lord can cause me to cry, but if he likes, he can also stop my crying because he is Ashutosha. He is so great that if he likes, he can immediately destroy my pregnancy. But by his mercy, he can also fulfill my desire that my pregnancy not be spoiled. Because he is all auspicious, it is not difficult for him to excuse me from being punished. Although he is now ready to punish me because I have moved his great anger. He appears like a man, but he is the Lord of all men.
Well, this is a perfect example of what you would call making something bad seem to be something that can be excused because of circumstances. What are the circumstances? Diti's lustiness. Well, is that something that can be excused? She's making the argument, yes, it is. But that's by getting the help of her husband, who is a staunch or very dedicated devotee of Lord Shiva. So you get someone, like if she goes directly to Lord Shiva and says, look, you got to excuse me, I made this mistake, she knows that Lord Shiva would probably not accept. So she goes through her husband, who has rendered much service to Lord Shiva. He's a Shiva Bhakta. And her hope is that her husband's pleading will soften Lord Shiva, and instead of becoming Rudra, he'll become Ashutosh, easily placated. You can look that word up, placate, P-L-A-K-A-T-E. What's it mean? Anybody? Placate?
Maharaj, the meaning is make someone less angry or hostile.
Say that again.
To make someone less angry or hostile.
There you go. So she might not be able to do that. She knows that. So she's going through her husband to placate Lord Shiva. These are strategies that clever people develop. And they use this type of, well, let's get this guy to help us because he's got a much better foothold with so-and-so. And if he asks to make a dispensation, then that person will probably say yes. So here we see, this is all clever stuff. It's what you would call strategies learned in the school of sense gratification. In the school of sense gratification, you learn these type of things. Just like Prahlad Maharaj, his father sent him to school with 2 demons as teachers so that he would be like the father, able to make what is wrong seem to be right and what is right to be wrong. Well, of course, Prahlad Maharaj did not accept. But this is what they teach in schools. That's why we say, if someone says, someone asks a young man and says, what do you want to be? He says, I want to be a lawyer. Oh, you want to be a liar, huh? What do lawyers do? They're experts at lying. And they can make arguments in such a way that the wrong thing seems right and the right thing seems wrong. So, lawyers are not the only ones that learn how to do these things. DTA obviously was very clever. Now this is dangerous because we're not supposed to be, let's say, clever. We're supposed to be devotees, pure devotees, and not have any material, let's say, desires that can lead to trying to whitewash sinful activities and make them seem okay. So, just like in that GBC meeting years ago, that one devotee was defeated by the body of the GBC, because those persons who read Srimad Bhagavatam and know what the facts are. What are the facts? Well, facts are Diti came to her senses after the abominable sexual intercourse with her husband. Such sexual intercourse is condemned as prostitution. In other words, sex life with one's wife is equal to prostitution if the regulations are not properly followed. Well, that is what you call unequivocal. Look that word up, unequivocal. There's no argument that you can make. It's absolutely factual. What?
Unambiguous.
Unambiguous. There it is. So how come this one devotee was making that argument? Because he was attached. And he wanted to make something wrong seem right. You know, and basically, what was his argument? No, look, he was saying basically, look, I got married because I wanted to have sense gratification. Well, wait a minute, that's not the purpose for getting married. It's not that, oh, well, I can't control my senses, so I'll get married and have all the sense gratification I can with my partner. That's not a reason to get married. The reason to get married is for two people to help each other control the senses and the mind and live a peaceful life. That's different than, oh, I'm getting married because I want to have, unlimited sense gratification with my wife. So that is defeated right here in what we just read. Okay, are there any questions? We'll go to text 36. Someone can read. Anybody?
Translation. Let him be pleased with us. Since he is my brother-in-law, the husband of my sister Sati, he is also the worshipable Lord of all women. He is the personality of all opulences and can show mercy towards women who are excused even by the uncivilized hunters. Purport. Lord Shiva is the husband of Sati, one of the sisters of Diti. Diti invoked the pleasure of her sister Sati so that Sati would request her husband to excuse her. Besides that, Lord Shiva is the worshipable Lord of all women. He is naturally very kind towards women, one on whom even the uncivilized hunters also show their mercy. Since Lord Shiva is himself associated with women, he knows very well their defective nature, and he might not take very seriously Diti's unavoidable offense, which occurred due to her faulty nature. Every virgin girl is supposed to be a devotee of Lord Shiva. Diti remembered her childhood worship of Lord Shiva and begged his mercy.
I mean, this lady is really smart, but in the wrong way. I mean, she's using every angle that she can think of to turn things around, to turn something around that is not excusable. I mean, there is mercy, there is forgiveness, yes, but you cannot forgive by making something wrong seem to be right, and employing all kinds of different people to help you do that. So, is this something that's going on regularly in society? Yes. And this type of, well, let's make what is completely wrong seem to be right by this strategy and that strategy and so forth. And this is not the life of a devotee. A devotee is not supposed to be so clever that they can make something wrong seem to be right. The life of a devotee is to follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. Then you don't have to be so tricky. See, whenever a person tries these types of techniques, they eventually get caught. You cannot get away with such blatant flaunting of what is wrong to try and make it seem that it's right. It's not going to succeed. In the beginning it might succeed for some time, but eventually it's going to be revealed. Therefore, what should be our real takeaway from hearing this episode of DT? It's that a crime does not pay. You're always going to be a loser if you engage in wrong activities. You might get away with it for some time, but eventually it's going to catch up to you. So, therefore, it's better not to even think of trying to make something wrong seem right. It's better to just admit, yes, I made a mistake. I'm ready to take the rectification process. And what's the rectification process? It's to take shelter of a genuine devotee or devotees and follow their instructions. Devotees are naturally merciful. They don't like to see people suffer. But don't try and cheat the devotee. Then you're going to cheat yourself. And if the devotee recommends certain things, then you should follow them. So, devotees are generally forgiving. But there are certain things that require rectification, and you cannot just whitewash everything on the plea of being merciful. The mercy is accepting the tapasya or whatever is recommended for amending the transgression of Vedic principles. That's the mercy. Then one learns never to do that again. Unfortunately, a lot of people have learned this process or these techniques that Aditi is manifesting here. And it's a carryover from their, now they're devotees, but there's still a carryover from their previous activities of being very clever and making something wrong seem right. So we can't be like that. We can't be clever. We have to be pure. There's a difference between being clever and being pure. So the advantage of being pure, if you make a mistake, you admit it, and you take whatever rectification is necessary to, rectify the mistake. That's the right thing to do. a devotee is supposed to be humble, not clever. A devotee is supposed to be honest, not making something wrong seem right, not employing other people to help you make the wrong seem right. So, what we see here is the problem of wanting to make the wrong thing seem right. And you just go deeper and deeper into what you would call sinful activity by doing that. It's better just to admit, yes, I made a mistake. I'm ready to accept whatever punishment there is for that mistake, and I beg your mercy to help me follow the rules and regulations. That's the proper way to deal with a situation like this. Not what DT is doing. It's just going to lead to more and more serious complications, as we're going to see. Are there any questions? Do you know anybody that's like that? No? There are many people like that, and they are very expert at twisting things, and they pride themselves on it. They're proud that they can do that, and they try and teach other people how to do that. So we have to be very careful in this world not to become a proponent of DT's what you would call strategies. We don't want to learn those type of strategies. Right? Okay. Are there any questions, any comments, or discussion you want to make?
Maharaj, I was just wondering, but from here where the fear of God came into place, because there is a lot of things, there is a manipulation, there is the cleverness of making the wrong right, and the fear of what Lord Shiva can do, and then the alternatives of how we can pacify.
Well, the solution is admit. If you made a mistake, admit it and ask and accept whatever recommendations are given by the genuine devotees to rectify that mistake. And he might say, well, I want some mercy also. Well, wait a minute. First of all, admit you made a mistake, and then accept the rectification for that mistake. And then we'll talk about, forgiveness. But, if you're just in, well, that's all right. Yeah, you murdered your brother. Oh, so it wasn't your fault. What? We're not. I mean, if you make a mistake, you have to admit it, or we have to admit it, and accept whatever rectification or punishment there is. And then, but you should know that devotees, genuine devotees, are not vengeful. They're not enjoying seeing somebody else suffer. So therefore, they'll be very kind and gentle. And but if you try and trick them, then you're going to be subject to an offense, a bigger offense. Usually what happens when people are too clever, they're trying to hide the mistake they made. But in the process of doing that, they make more mistakes that are even worse. And therefore the whole situation gets much worse than what it actually could have been if they were just honest. So you can learn a lot by reading this section of the Bhagavatam. So now your question was about mercy.
The fear of God.
Oh, fear of God, right? Yeah. Well, the fear of God. Why would you fear God if you follow God's instructions? One time my father told me, look, if you do everything right and not do anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. But if you're doing wrong things, you're going to be worried all the time, right? So, like for example, there was this person, I forget his name now. He had a big company worth billions and billions of dollars, and the whole thing collapsed. And when it collapsed, rather than be honest, he tried to hide the money in different ways. So the fact that you go bankrupt, it's not actually a criminal thing unless you did it on purpose. Like I remember one time I was in this steam room getting a steam bath, and a bunch of men came in, and they were talking really loudly, and they were joking around. And then another man came, and they all stood up and gave him respect. So, one by one, those men left, and there was one of them left. One of them was still in the steam room with me, so I said to him, I said, who was that guy? Why'd you all stand up and congratulate him? Oh, he said, oh, he's a very special man. I said, really? How's that? I said, he's an expert at going bankrupt. I said, what? He said, wait a minute. He said, are you Jewish? I said, no. You don't. That's why you said that. That's why you don't understand. I said, wait a minute. You get me confused here. Can you tell me what you're talking about? He said, well, look, there's two ways of going bankrupt. One is you lose everything. Two is you become rich by going bankrupt. I said, but how can you get rich by going bankrupt? He said, see, you don't understand. I said, well, maybe I shouldn't understand. I mean, this is a true story. So, they were applauding this guy because he went bankrupt and became a millionaire by cheating, right? And so this is what we're faced with in the material world today, situations like that, people like that, right? They purposely go bankrupt and to cheat other people. And the other people lose their money, and this one guy just runs away because he's very clever. So recently there was this one man who was very rich. He went bankrupt. But there's no, let's say, punishment for going bankrupt, because it happens sometimes, right? But if you try and cheat people by doing that, that's a crime. See? So, is there fear of God? No, because anyone who doesn't fear God doesn't believe God exists. See? So, they always think, well, I have this friend, I have that friend, this politician will help me, and I can I can get away with this and I can get away with that. Now look what's in the news. Every day there's news about Trump. It's not unending, right? And his situation gets worse and worse, where he can end up in jail now. He used to be president of the United States, and now he's going to go to jail, which is something that's never happened before, right? But it looks like it's going to happen. Now, why is that? Because there's no humility. Years ago, about maybe Chaitanya Sundar can tell me, I asked his daughter, Shrestha, to write a letter to Trump. Remember that? Why don't you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, this was almost 5-6 years ago, Maharaj. So you made her write a letter to Trump, who was just a president elected at that time.
I asked her. I didn't make her. I asked her.
Yeah, you asked her, and then she wrote a draft, and then you also helped her to further revise it. So this letter was sent. She even wrote a nice cover. Drew on the cover the flag of America, and she made it look very,
She spent
special.
time.
She spent a lot of time, and then sent it, but there was absolutely no response at all.
Yeah, but what was the letter about?
Yeah, so the letter was about how to build an ideal kingdom, or like the society, and the letter talked about the Rama Rajyam, the king, Lord Rama, and how he essentially got the society by following the Krishna conscious principles of 4 regulative
How
principles.
everyone was happy in his kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, completely ignored it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he had at least the decency to answer her, and maybe even invite her, which was what I was hoping, that he would invite her to come and see him and discuss. Nothing.
Yeah, absolutely no follow.
Yeah. So this is the problem we're dealing with. And then what happens when you think that you're so clever that you can wiggle your way through all, situations where you're making mistakes, but you can get away with it because you have this strategy and that strategy. It just makes it worse. Doesn't make it better. And what kind of example are you giving? Just like Slick Willie. You know who Slick Willie is? It's not Trump, but before Trump, it was Clinton. Slick Willie, that's his name, Slick Willie. Now, see, when you try and hide something that's wrong, you just make the situation much worse. So, here's Slick Willie Clinton, who engages in illicit sexual activity with a lady, goes on national television and shakes his finger like this into the camera and said, I did not have any relationship with this lady. He's lying, right? So he thought, well, that'll end it, right? I'm President of the United States. I made an absolute, affirmation that he had nothing to do with this lady, right? What happened? When that lady had, the illicit activity with him, and this is what's going on in this world. I mean, it's unbelievable. Later on, they produced the dress with the DNA on the dress of Clinton, and then it became very clear that he lied. President of the United States goes on television and lies to the whole country. And he gets, trouble is that the family of the girl that engaged in that activity with him was more clever than he was. He was already very clever. She out-clevered him, and he got caught. Now you see, all these things are happening. What is the effect on children in the country when, just like there's a story about George Washington, one day his father saw that someone had cut down an apple tree, and he said, "George, did you cut the apple tree down?" And George Washington was a young boy, said, "Father, I cannot tell a lie. Yes, I cut it down." Now, whether this story is true or not, but see, that was something that's meritorious. The young boy says, "I cannot tell a lie. I did it." Right. Now we fast forward 200 years, and Slick Willie goes in front of the television with like 40, 50 million Americans hearing him, and he said, and shaking his finger like this, "I did not have any relationship with that woman." This is crazy. What do you think the kids are going to learn about this? And where's the fear of God? They don't believe in God. See? They don't believe it. They've been taught that in school how to wiggle your way through all situations, through half-truths and no truths and so forth. This is very dangerous. This is destroying the very fiber of goodness in the society. And just like one day there's this young boy, he graduated high school, he was going to go to college, and his father was a good friend of mine. His father was a very, very wealthy man. So I said to him, "Prabhu, I wanted to test him, see." So I said, "If you thought you could make a lot of money illegally, would you do it?" And he didn't really think about it very much. He just hesitated a little bit and looked at me and said, "If I thought I could get away with it, I would do it." I'm not kidding you. He's only 18 years old, just graduates high school. Now he's going to go to college. And where did he learn that from? If I can get away with it, I would do it. No, he would risk. You see, this is what's going on in this country. The whole fiber of goodness is destroyed by this whole culture of wiggle your way through situations by different strategies. Get this liar, which, liar is another name for a lawyer. And this one's a better liar than the other liar. Hire the best liar, and he'll get you off the hook. See? So there's no fear of God because they don't believe in God. If they believed in God, there's no reason to fear God, because if you follow His rules and regulations, there's nothing to fear. But if you do violate those rules and regulations, you have something to fear. And the only way to compensate for it is to admit the truth and accept whatever punishment is meted out to you, and to be honest. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay, so we'll stop right there. So when your kid graduates and is ready to go to college, ask them the question. If you could make a lot of money by doing something illegal, would you do it? And if they say, if I thought I could get away with it, I will do it. You got a real problem. Your kid did not get education. They were poisoned by the world of duplicity. Haribol. One time, one of my sons and I were having a discussion, and I said to him, look, it doesn't really matter whether you're rich or you're poor. What matters is, are you honest? Can people actually respect you because they know you're not going to lie to them? If you're honest, then people will help you in many ways. But if they find out you're a liar, you're going to lose your support. You're not going to get any support because people say, oh, he's a liar. So at least, see, they're being taught you want to get rich. They should be taught you want to be honest and straightforward and not engage in any type of surreptitious behavior. The worst thing is a liar. There's a saying in Sanskrit that Bhumi cannot support the weight of a liar. Yeah. So if someone's a liar, it puts such a weight on Bhumi Devi, the mother of the earth, that she cannot support it. So the worst thing is to be a liar. The best thing is just to be honest and not try and wiggle your way through things by trying to trick people. So here we see what's going to happen to Diti. So this is a very instructive part of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Haribol. All glories to Prabhupada.